about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we're pleased to have Mr. Nick Dranias. He's the president and executive director of Compact for America Educational Foundation. The Compact of America initiative involves a powerful federal balanced budget amendment. Mr. Dranias previously served as general counsel and constitutional policy director for the Goldwater Institute. He also served as a constitutional scholar, authoring articles dealing with a wide spectrum of issues in constitution and regulatory policy. It is our pleasure and our honor to have Mr. Dranias with us today. Whoop, where are you?
Just please call me Nick.
Okay, Nick, thank you very much. There you are, Nick. We got you. Yeah, you do have a nice backdrop.
Yeah, well, we try.
Yeah, well, nice speaking to you over LinkedIn, I guess. You know, I appreciate that. And that's, I guess, where I found your name and start reading about the some of the issues that you were dealing with. And as an opening, Nick, could you explain for our audience so they'll know where you're coming from, about your institute, what you are trying to accomplish, how you're going to accomplish it, and where you are at this point in time?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is the problem. The root cause of an overreaching and irresponsible federal government is the illusion of unlimited resources that an unlimited borrowing capacity gives the elected class. I mean, if you think about it, if you have an unlimited credit card and you can promise anything it takes to get elected, then everyone who's talking about limited government gets outcompeted in the long run, and that's exactly what we've seen. So if you want to strike at the root cause, it's not the sufficient, if you fix this, it's not going to fix everything. But if you don't fix this, we'll never win anything. Right. So we have to limit the borrowing capacity of the federal government. So that's the problem. The solution is what we do at Compact for America. We're trying to organize the states formally into a contract, a binding sovereign contract to get the job done. Unlike all these other efforts that sort of herd cats for hundreds of years to try to get the states to organize a convention for proposing amendments, like a balanced budget amendment, which is what we're focused on, we say, let's have all the states agree in advance to everything that needs to be done to amend the Constitution in a binding contract with a shot clock. What I mean by that is a deadline to get it done. And in our case, we've already got 4 states, Alaska, Georgia, Mississippi, and North Dakota, who have agreed formally in a fully binding sovereign contract to advance a federal balanced budget amendment by April 12th, 2021. Now, nothing's going to happen until we get 38 states into this agreement. Why 38 states? That's the number you need for ratification. And what the states are agreeing to in this contract is everything it takes to get the job done. So you want to have the number that you need for ratification before anything happens. So that's the solution. A balanced budget amendment is a way of limiting the borrowing capacity of the federal government, protecting future generations from unlimited taxation, which will follow either in the form of inflation or actual taxes to pay down the debt, and stop the growth of unlimited irresponsible government, which is created by the illusion of unlimited resources.
Right. Well, I understand that Article 5 of the Constitution permits you to do this. I mean, this is a constitutional effort. So we're not bypassing the Constitution or taking some radical or changes. But it takes, 2/3 of the states? Am I correct, in order to affect a constitutional change?
You're referring, so this is what the way to think about it is we have a contract between the states to use the power you're describing in Article 5. So the compact is the contract. The contract says that we're not going to have anything activate in the amendment process until we get to the ratification number, which is 3/4 of the states.
Okay.
And the reason why we do that is there's no point in starting the process if you can't finish it. And especially when we're dealing with the borrowing capacity of the federal government, because we could turn into Greece in the next 10 years. So if we can't get to that ratification within the next 6 years, we're probably not going to be able to fix the problem. It's probably going to take a different issue or different form of reform. So let me step back and just explain the compact, the contract itself. So in this one agreement, is everything you need to organize the convention for proposing amendments that Article 5 talks about. So in it, you have the application to Congress for the convention. In it, you have designated the delegates. The default setting is the governor who signs this contract into law. In it is all the rules to govern the convention. In our compact, all the states agree that it will be a 24-hour up or down vote on a particular balanced budget amendment we can talk about. And then also in the compact is an agreement in advance that if this amendment is proposed by the convention, then it will be ratified by every state who's agreed. So you package all of this into one thing that you pass one time in each state. So you get in and out of each state with one bill. Then on the flip side, you have the congressional component, because Congress has a role to play in Article 5. Congress has to call the convention. But we want to make sure Congress just doesn't call any convention, doesn't call a wide open convention, doesn't ignore what the states have agreed to. So we actually have pending in Congress right now, HCR 26, which says Congress will call the convention that the states have agreed to in this compact when that compact goes live with 38 states. And so we have that resolution is going forward right now with 19 co-sponsors in the House, and Senator Perdue of Georgia in the Senate side has agreed to introduce it if we can find another co-sponsor out there. So that can pass. As soon as that passes, now we've got Congress committed to the whole process. We're out of Congress. We never have to go back. The states take over. It becomes entirely a question of whether we can get 38 states to join this contract. So it's a completely different approach to what Article 5 is usually invoked. Most people, Article 5 is just, let's have 2/3 of the states apply to Congress, hope people get their act together and send delegates, hope Congress plays along, hope that the rules will be sorted out when they get there, hope that they'll draft a good amendment, hope that Congress will play along on the back end and send it out for ratification, and then hope that the states will ratify it at 3/4 of the states. So that's the alternative. That's the alternative to the That's not me. That's the alternative to the compact approach, is to do this in 7 or 6 stages with uncertainty at each stage, with not knowing what you're going to get at each stage. Now, I'm not afraid of that process. I just think, if you see a way to get everything done in advance and you know exactly what you're doing all this heavy lifting for, and you have certainty about the product and the policy, it seems to me that's a superior way to go. Yep. And so that's the compact approach.
Well, I'm sort of an anti-federalist in a way. I would prefer that the United States be a confederation of states, each of them being totally sovereign and joined together with some sort of agreement. How that would work, I don't know, but I sure favor that over what we have now. Not originally what we started with, but what we have now. Just about 2 weeks ago, my wife and I drove up to Wichita, Kansas, and listened to a couple of talks by Michael Tanner from the Cato Institute. He's a senior scholar, and he wrote a book, Going for Broke. And in there, he outlines the wherewithal of how the debt, our national debt, is increasing. And this year, for example, our deficit, not the debt, but the deficit on the debt would be somewhere in the $450, $460 billion range. And that's one of the lowest it's been for years. However, that'll only 2 years. The line goes straight up. And primarily because of the entitlement program, Obamacare, all this other stuff, and including Social Security. And we're going to be in the $1 trillion plus deficit, yearly deficit range. And this line goes literally straight up. It hardly has a lean to it. Now, but most of these programs are not like military programs where you can just say, all right, stop a war, bring the jets, the soldiers home, and your costs go away. This is going to affect people just like it affected Greece. You mentioned Greece, and we are Greece, in my opinion. Right now, I don't think we have to wait much. We have to wait at all. So in order to have a balanced budget, to affect a balanced budget, you're going to have to cut the welfare. You're going to have to have food assistance. You're going to have to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all of the social programs that make up 3/4 or more of the deficit every month, every year. So, although the states may in my opinion, may agree to that now. You think when the time comes, they follow through with that?
Well, I think I'd put it differently. I think you're underestimating how much economic damage government spending does. Because Peter Ferreira over at the Heartland Institute has done a number of interesting studies, recently came out with a book that if you just slow down the growth in federal spending, just slow it down, you free up resources that would otherwise be claimed by the government, which is just so immensely less efficient than the private sector, that the economic growth that you generate will be just dramatically greater. And then with a compounding effect, you generate enough revenue for the government to then carry on. So here's the thing I would throw at you, and it's a little bit of pushback. It is, you're underestimating just how much damage the government borrowing money from our kids, claiming resources today, does to our economy.
Right.
If you just slow down how much the government can claim out of the economy for its own purposes and free those resources up to the private sector, which is what happens if you slow down how much they borrow.
Correct.
Then you're going to see growth expand at a level that you can't even imagine. And that will actually, and Peter Ferreira basically has this interesting series of graphs. He basically shows that if you slow things down to, the rate of inflation or a little bit higher in terms of government spending, eventually within a few years, you've got so much economic growth that you're covering basically year 2000 levels of social programs.
Right.
And so the idea that there has to be massive cuts is not true. There does have to be a switch from unlimited borrowing, exponential growth in spending, and so people will feel they won't constantly get enhancements in their government programs, right? But it's not hard. Because of the damage that's done by government spending to the economy, it's not hard to resume greater levels of growth simply by slowing government spending. But back to your point, let's suppose that that nobody liked even what little modesty, what little moderation was required in their social programs. This is why you use a compact. This is why you use a binding contract. You leverage 200 years of sovereign case law that have uniformly enforced these agreements on states, for good and for ill, to keep the states in the deal. and so that by the time you hit that threshold at 38 states, the process unfolds like a set of falling dominoes.
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. I'm on the same page with you. I would love to see this happen. I mean, me being a radical libertarian, I mean, if the government spent $3.80, I think that would be too much. So don't get me wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess I'm being very. Our government has done a great job of making me the world's biggest skeptic in the world. I mean, I just find it every time the government proposes something or say they're going to do something, it always seems to a situation evolves where they have to make certain adjustments, and then we go back to the same old thing. It's like a person who's on a diet, and they do well for a couple of weeks, and then, it's their birthday party, and then they eat like eat like crazy, and then they just forget they're on a diet for the next 2 weeks, and they gain back all their weight.
And I almost feel like
that's the way I feel about it. I'm sorry, and again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I would love to see this happen, and I don't want to discourage you. It's just that I can't get out of my head that the government is always one step ahead and cheating us.
Well, no, but your point is well taken. And in fact, I think that's a fact of reality, right? The fact of the reality out there is that not everybody's principled, disciplined, restrained. We're dealing with a tiny minority of people who even really care or understand liberty. And that is always going to be the case. There's never going to be a society where 95% of the culture you're in agrees with the principles that you and I share. So what do you do in that society? You don't get in there with a heavy-handed constitutional reform that jams everything we want down their throat. What you do is you create an incentive structure, and this is what the Balanced Budget Amendment does. The thing to understand about this, the compact, the agreement to get the job done is firm and hard because that's something that's been sustained for 200 years. We can rely on that as much as we can rely on anything. But the payload, the amendment itself, is not hugely prescriptive. It's simply a set of incentives. We limit how much borrowing capacity there is to a specific dollar amount. We don't give Congress any ability to increase it, but we do allow for flexibility by the states. The states can approve an increase in that borrowing capacity at simple majority levels. We don't let them do that willy-nilly. We require them to agree within 60 days of a proposal, which is a hard logistical hurdle. It's generally only going to be overcome in times of true, genuine emergency. So the structure of the amendment is not to say, stop spending this, stop spending that. It's to say, we want to limit your credit card. We're going to give you some flexibility, but the debt addict is not going to be in control. The states aren't perfect, but generally they're closer to us.
Right.
In the long run, they're going to listen to us more often than Congress does. So we're not going to make the system worse. We're going to have an incentive to make it better. It's not going to make things perfect overnight, but the trend of this system, because of the incentives it creates, will be for the better in the long run. So the way you have to think is take your impatient libertarian hat off, which I sometimes share, and recognize that we're always going to be steering the Titanic. And we're fortunate enough, I still think, that we're about 10 miles away from the iceberg. And we can still, with a tiny little shift in the direction, we can avoid the iceberg. Now, we might hit other smaller icebergs, right? And there might be other problems. But we still have that ability to turn the ship. And the way you do it is you create enough incentive structures in your reform that the political class, the bad guys, do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And this is actually a quote that Milton Friedman used for many, many years, to try to to get at the more Murray Rothbard approach, which is to go right for the jugular and fix everything all at once.
Right.
Is that Milton Friedman always emphasized that the way to do big comprehensive reform is to create incentives where the wrong guys do the right things for the wrong reasons. That's how you the kind of structural reform that lasts.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention that, folks, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, your comment, you can call us anytime during this live broadcast on 646-652-4620, 646-652-4620, and dial 1 so the board operator will know that you want to ask a question. You can listen on the phone if you'd like, if you're not listening on YouTube or Liberty Talk Radio or Blog Talk Radio or whatever, but you can listen on your phone, and if you just dial 1, we'll know that you want to break in and ask a question. So please feel free. 646-652-4620. Could we put that number on the board? Yeah, put that number on the board so people can see it. Here it goes. Now, did the I'm going to steer off a little bit and ask your opinion on a couple of things. The debates, the Republican debates.
No.
I know. I hate asking this question, but I have to. You know, I'm a talk show host. I got to ask the stupid questions too. You know, did they give you any reason to be optimistic at all?
Well, first of all, I'm working with a C3, so I can't say anything or do anything that is viewed as an endorsement or an opposition to any presidential candidate.
Okay.
My speech is not free in that regard.
Okay.
But nevertheless, what I saw was there's a growing. I mean, I don't want to name names, but there is a general growth in impatience and distaste for business as usual in politics. It's manifesting itself in fortunate and unfortunate ways. I think that's healthy. The problem is I fear whether the culture now is shifted to a point where we're more third worldy than we are first worldly. And what I mean by that is that a charismatic leader becomes really attractive and seizes on what would otherwise be a healthy, disruptive or anti-establishment skepticism and outrage, and then ends up creating a worse system.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most discouraging, I watched only part of the debates because I couldn't stomach the whole thing, but and I can say whatever I want, you know, I'm not restricted at all. And but when Rand Paul and Christie had this bout back and forth, and basically about the spying on Americans, you know, the NDAA and the what do they call it, the spying on America, the NSA and stuff like that. And Christie said he wanted to step it up because he wanted to protect America. And the only time during that entire debate that I saw that someone stood up for the Constitution was when Rand Paul, he said, no, I want to stand up for the Bill of Rights and for the Constitution, for protect America's individual liberty, or words such as that. And it was so refreshing to hear that, because throughout the entire debate, you didn't hear one reference to the Constitution, one reference to the Bill of Rights, one reference to the Declaration of Independence, not one reference to individual liberty. It all had to do about government spending and what government can do for you. And now, they all basically were all on the same page when it came to securing the border, fighting ISIS and ISIL and whatever. In other words, they're all for spending lots of money on things that we shouldn't be spending a dime on, but they never said how they were going to do it and how much it would cost. This gave me reason to be very skeptical of the whole system, although you're right, the Donald Trumps of this world have brought to fore, hey, how about some honest talk, even if we disagree with you?
Yeah, I think, not to take it back to the original issue, but you're never going to get specifics unless the political class has a reason to have specifics. And as long as they know in the back pocket they've got an unlimited credit card, they're going to play the game. Yeah. So I go back to my original point. It's not an arbitrary point to justify what we're doing in Compact for America. It is a fact. In 1798, Thomas Jefferson said if there was one thing that would restore the Constitution, in 1798, he said it would be taking away the borrowing capacity of the federal government.
Right.
And the reason why he said that is he already saw it happening with Hamilton and his national bank and everybody trying to expand government to do unlimited spending within the enumerated powers, right?
Right.
And so the point is, these guys can, all of these political people on both sides of the aisle can play the game of rhetoric all day and all night, because in the end they know they've got an unlimited credit card and they can buy votes later on. And so this is the problem of our system. If you allow elected officials the unlimited capacity to promise anything it takes to get elected, or once elected to promise anything to stay reelected, they're going to do it. And so you're never going to get specifics. Think about it this way. If you had an unlimited credit card, why would you have any specifics in your personal finances? Yeah. If it was never going to be limited and there's never going to be anyone to take it away from you, why would you even have a budget? Why would anything matter? I mean, it would be a fantasy land, but it would still, the underlying reason to budget, to talk in specifics, would not be there. So the problem you're seeing is all symptomatic of the underlying problem of unlimited borrowing capacity. But
hasn't the American public been indoctrinated to believe that money grows on trees? Nick, when I graduated college, I got a job in 1440 Broadway in Manhattan. Now, that's expensive territory. I was the sales promotion and advertising coordinator for the Federated Stores and AMC, the AMC Corporation. And at that time, my gross pay was $362.50 a month. Now this goes back a few years, and yet my point being is, although I was making very, very little, I mean, I took the subway to work. I had nothing. I didn't even have a car at the time, but I always put $5 a week away. My point being is that I knew a lot of people who did the same thing. It wasn't unusual what I did. Everyone did it. People worked, they produced, and they took whatever meager resources they had, and they saved them. They produced, and they saved or invested all the time. And no matter, even if it was $1, 50 cents, they did it. Today's mentality is that, well, we don't save, we consume and spend. That's all we do, is consume and spend, and somehow the economy works. Now, and again, don't get me wrong, I'm with you 100%. I wish all this would happen. What I'm talking about is the receiving end, the people who are going to be the recipients of this cutback, they're not accustomed to this, working for $300 a month and putting $5 away. They're accustomed to making $5,000 a month and spending $7,000. How do you think? Don't you think we're going to be another Greece with people taking to the streets the second that we cut back anything? And then, of course, the politicians will want to stay in office, and somehow they'll concoct a way to get around this compact or this legislation, even if it means starting another war, saying, well, all bets are off, we have a war to fight. I mean, I am so skeptical. You shouldn't be on this program because I'm such a skeptic. And again, not of you, but of the system.
No, and that's why I got to emphasize that the amendment in the compact is flexible. The political class, all it has to do is persuade 26 state legislatures, and they can get as much borrowing capacity as they want. They got to do it in 60 days. They got to do it with simple majorities of Congress to pass the measure first. Now, those hurdles are not insurmountable. And the goal of any good amendment is to, or let's put it this way, if you're going to have a casino, you don't want the House to win 99% of the time because nobody will go, right? We've designed this amendment to keep the bad guys playing by our rules, by giving them some legitimate chance of winning from time to time, us losing from time to time. And so we think we've struck the right balance. We've designed this system that, from time to time they're going to get excessive borrowing capacity, but it won't be all the time. And the fact that they know it won't be all the time will change their mentality. For the first time ever, even if they think they're going to win half the time, 2/3 of the time, they're still going to have to prepare for the days that they don't win. And so they're going to have to prioritize. They're going to have to husband their resources to a greater extent than we see. And here's why that makes a difference. The destructive power of government spending is so great that if you just change it marginally, if you just free up a tiny sliver of the resources that government is destroying, then you create growth that can then carry us through the problem. So this is the thing to understand, is don't underestimate the power of the private sector if liberated even from a light touch of the federal government to grow. And so our goal is recognizing that a dollar spent by the federal government is a dollar burnt, and maybe sometimes $2 burnt, right? Depending on how they spend it. Right. Leaving that $1, even out of 100, in the hands of the private sector with compounding is always going to grow the economy in such an exponential rate that if you can just keep that dollar flowing, then we're going to be okay. So, and then here's the other thing. Let me give you some optimism about Greece. We're nowhere near as bad as Greece in terms of government dependency. Dan Mitchell at Cato just posted a piece a couple of days ago, and he pointed out that in Greece, 67% of the population is 100% dependent on government. Okay, we're only at 40%. It's only. Right?
Thank you, Nick. I feel so much better now. Oh my goodness gracious! At least I can have breakfast this morning, and feel good about it. Oh,
well, no, but that's significant because in a semi-democratic system, right? If you have 67% of the population on the hook to government spending, there's no way that system can fix itself. Right. It's just no way. 40%, we still get a shot. And that's why, another reason why the compact is a time limit, because in a lot of ways, you're right. We don't know what would happen to this compact 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now. Right. We can't imagine, we can't model in our head all the crazy, horrible things that bad people can do, but for the next 6 years, I think we can pretty much model it. And we can think about the risks, and that's why the compact goes away April 12, 2021.
Okay, Nick, could you just hold on for a minute for station identification, and we'll be right back?
Sure.
All right, thank you very much. Folks, hold on, please. And remember, 646-652-4620. Let's hear from you. Now we're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank Attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires for a free consultation. Call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, welcome back. This is Joe Cristiano. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio, and with us we have Mr. Nick Dranias, and we're talking about the Compact for America, balancing the budget and having a constitutionally, so that we can whittle away at this massive government debt and maybe save America from total bankruptcy in the decades to come. Nick, It just seems that the timing is not very good here, and because I'm sort of a demographics guy, I like hot, muscle cars and stuff like that, and I always watch. I go to auctions and whatever, and I watch them on television, and you learn after a while that cars are sold depending on demographics. The people who are there with the money, if a particular car is of an era that they remember when they were young, they will pay big money for it. I remember one time I was at a big auction, and this beautiful, I think 32 Ford over restored came on and didn't even sell, never made reserve, and it was very inexpensive at the time. We're in a recession. This was several years ago at the time. And I turned around to the guy that was sitting next to me, who was a professional trader, and I was just there to have fun, and I was going to buy a car. But and I said, how come it didn't sell? He says, it's all a matter of demographics. And that was stuck with me. And it seems that everything's a matter of demographics. If you look at today, young people are relying on the government for their education, not their parents. They don't have part-time jobs anymore, because they even if they did, it wouldn't pay for one of the several subjects that they took. There are fewer people employed today, more people that are relying on government subsidies, because when I say subsidies, I'll include not Social Security as a subsidy, but a payback, my savings account. But like myself, my wife and I are collecting Social Security because we paid in for 55 years. We're still, by the way, we're still working, we're still paying in. But there's all this money coming in. And there are not enough young people. I have one son that's 42 years old. He had his first baby yesterday at 41. Now, 40 years ago, at the age of 22, he would have had 3 kids. Are the demographics working all against this?
No, not yet. But eventually they will. 10 years out from now, it's hard again to see the path of our country being any different than Greece and any of the southern Mediterranean or third world countries that have had similar financial problems. So your point is well taken eventually. But right now, the reality is this. We've got 26 states that are receptive, that should be wanting to get into this amendment, in this amendment effort. You've got another 5 to 6 states where it's a pretty good shot. And then beyond that, it gets tough. But even in the states that it gets tough in, people are not complete idiots. Even if you depend on all this largesse from the government, it doesn't take a whole lot of energy to read the headlines from Puerto Rico and read the headlines from Greece to see who gets hurt first when the system crashes. It's not the super wealthy. It's not the upper middle class. Right. The people who get creamed in the system when it crashes are the poor and the lower middle class and the people receiving these subsidies, and they get creamed in a totally disorderly, unexpected way. and in ways where they're actually getting jacked by the people they thought supported them. And I mean this literally. I mean, the communist guy running Greece promised all of his people that he'd protect them, and then he goes into a backroom deal and cuts something that screws them all from their own perspective, right?
That was remarkable that he did that. That was something else.
I know my people. I can see it happening sometimes, but the bottom line is this. All you have to do to pitch this to the dependent millennials to even the center left is to point out that you've got a pie chart of government spending. 2/3 of it is for things like military, Social Security, Medicare. Those things are really going to be hard to touch. When push comes to shove, where they're going to do all the cutting is going to be in that third. That third is everything from student loans to environmentalism programs to state grants for preschool education, that sort of thing. That is really popular with those people, right? And when they look at that pie chart, and I've done this, I've seen this, I've persuaded folks that are completely hardcore progressive that there has to be some structure in place that moderates our borrowing and moderates our spending so that we don't get to a point where we're staring over the cliff and that third goes away instantly. It will. That third will go away instantly because it's the least politically strong part of the budget. And that means all of these social welfare groups at the local level lose all their funding, right? And so because Social Security, Medicare, and the military are pretty much going to stay where they are because there's so many powerful interests in favor of them until the system really totally crashes, right? So that's how you pitch this to the center left, to the kids and everyone else. Is you say, look, you are the most vulnerable political demographic when it comes to making cuts. If you don't moderate our spending now, those cuts will happen eventually. It will happen in a dramatic way. Our creditors will stop lending us, or the inflation rate will get so high that all this grant money means nothing anymore. So the question is, do you want to get on board with turning us away from that iceberg, or do you want to just ram right into it, knowing you're at the bow?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's my father my father was from the old country. He came here with absolutely nothing, not a dime in his pocket, didn't speak the language, and yet was a successful businessman. And even after he was here for 40 years, when he spoke, no one understood him. He spoke English, but we all, yeah, sure, yeah. We had no idea what he was saying. But he worked very, very hard. And, of course, I'm not of the same persuasion. I wish I was half as good as my father. But still, I learned a lot from that, in that here I am, I'm 72 years old. I know I look no more than 16 or 17 years old, but I'm 72 years old. Preston, stop laughing. That's not very nice.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I was laughing at something else.
I just got a short haircut, that's all. But here I am at 72 years old, and you know what I'm still doing? I'm still saving. I mean, here's my problem, is that I know people that are about my age who have that same mentality. I mean, they're still working. They're still thinking about the future. I mean, way out in the future. They're still saving. They're still investing. They pay off their debts. They have very few fixed debts. But the world today is the opposite. It's debt. Don't save. Don't borrow. First of all, you can't save because you get no money back on your money when you save it in the bank, and there's a good chance the government's going to take it from you anyway. So I guess where I can't fit the pieces together is that how do you take someone like me, who quite frankly on a weekly basis gets more wealthy, and I'm the minority, and the vast majority every single week people get more in the hole? Well,
the bottom line is that system is unsustainable. At some point, it will crash. You have to look at the numbers and say, are we there yet? And we're not there yet. We're not at 66%, 67% of our population. We're at 40, and then you've got another 20 beyond that are fairly, dependent. But it's still politically possible under the current demographics to get moderation built back into the system. People are not so dependent yet where they won't think rationally and say to themselves, I'd ride into on the bow of the Titanic and enjoy it, right into the iceberg, right? So the question is, how do we create habits that encourage them to start thinking more responsibly? The first step is to start having them think about limited resources.
Right.
To imagine that maybe they won't get the student loans anymore. Maybe they won't get bailed out anymore, right? see, part of the problem is that we've taught these generations that the chumps are the people who save. That you being responsible are actually missing out on the party.
Right.
Now, if we can turn that around in the next few years and say to them, look, the party for you is ending, and it's going to be a lot more damaging than you can imagine. Look at Puerto Rico, look at Greece, look at Argentina. These other issues, look at China. China, I'm not convinced isn't going to crash. If you look at their stock market and everything else, I mean, they're going to have more and more teachable moments saying to them, look, the party's ending, the party's ending, the party's ending. And then there's going to be counterexamples, places like Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, to some extent, even Germany and the Scandinavian states, because they actually went through their troubled times and they've kind of found a sort of steady state welfare state that isn't completely ridiculous, right? So you're going to have a range of examples that can apply, no matter what your political persuasion is, to basically ask them just to be not stupid. Don't crash the system. Don't destroy your future. I think we can reach them in the near term. In the long term, the problem is if we don't reach them, then the dependency level becomes so great that they're literally like children and they don't even understand anymore what it means to even think about depriving themselves or having self-restraint. We're not there yet. And here's the other thing that works in our favor. I mean, the reality is that technology is producing wealth at rates exponentially, despite all the burdens we put on freedom. I mean, if we had like an energy breakthrough that made fracking half as much as it is now, it would be another revolution in economic growth. I mean, even things as goofy as solar panels now are getting to the point where they're competitive, even without government subsidies, right? We might have fusion power in the next 10 years, right? I mean, part of the reason why some of these welfare states out and around the world have succeeded in places for as long as they did. Now, they're not anymore, but for as long as they did, places like Venezuela, France, Saudi Arabia, Scandinavian countries. Why did they succeed? Because they had vast stores of energy, right? Like they the ability to paper over through real wealth production. They could waste a lot as they were generating it, right? So the thing to understand is that as long as that trend in technology continues, and there's a lot of good reasons to believe that internationally it will, you're going to see enough wealth being created where we're going to constantly have enough of a toehold, at least in the near term, to keep making this case that things could be even better. Things could, the future is coming. We can beat the efforts to destroy the economy. But I'm with you. I see, 10, 20 years out, I just don't see, if we don't change this habit and get closer to the habit that your father had, that you have, that I have to a lesser degree, then we're going to crash the system. And the worst part about it is, unlike the 1930s, you're going to crash a system and you're going to do terrible policy, but you're not going to have an underlying culture of self-reliance to build yourself back. Yeah. You're going to have an underlying culture of gimme, 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 take. That means Western civilization, or at least a civilization, could end. And that's why I'm in it. I've got a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. I see these trends. I don't want to move them to New Zealand or Singapore or Hong Kong and escape it. I want to save this country because in the end, it's our example in this country that has made everything else possible. It's however imperfect it may be, when people, even today, when they think of free market capitalism, wealth, when they think of freedom of speech, when they think of the ability to do what you want in your own life, your own style, whatever, they think of America. When that light goes out, it will be eventually every light goes out, because there isn't a culture yet that can creatively sustain it. There's only cultures that can copy it. Maybe that will change. Hopefully that will change. Maybe other cultures will pick up the torch and run with it and make it better. But I don't see that yet.
Yeah. Well, Nick, typically government takes action when there's a crisis, and then all bets are off the table. There are many economists, especially those that I have some respect for, and I know many of them because I follow economic issues probably closer than anything else, that feel that we are not on a sustainable course, that they're in the short term, we're in for a big downturn because of all the government money that's put into the system. And although they say the unemployment rate is 5.2% or whatever it is, there's still like 96 million people unemployed, which that makes no sense. In other words, they fudge the figures to make everything look good when things on an economic front are not very good. They're not sustainable the way we're going now. If in fact we had this constitutional amendment where the states ratified a balanced budget type amendment. And there is a financial crisis which is looming over us right now. Don't all bets go off the table and then the government comes back and starts spending by the trillions to sort of, save the Titanic again?
Well, no, because they're going to have to. There's no way that any known evasion tactic can work with our amendment. Why? Because we do it very simply. We say you can't spend more than taxes bring in and what full faith and credit borrowing brings in, and then we limit the full faith and credit borrowing to a specific dollar amount, and then the only flexibility we give it is to get a majority of states to approve an increase. Now, there's no way to cheat this without lying about how much money's in the coffer, but even then, because you're limiting spending to cash, you can't spend it, even if you say I've got X dollars and you don't really have X dollars. So this can't be cheated doing anything that you normally would do, except you might try to float illegal bonds. And if they did that, the nice thing about our amendment is our amendment says any bonds issued that are not in compliance with this are void. So there's a cloud placed over the bonds from the get-go. And all it takes is one legislator somewhere to write a letter to Moody's and you can shut that down. So the thing to understand here is that the political class, knowing this structure, is going to want to play within this structure. So they're going to try in an emergency to get states to approve some new borrowing level that's commensurate with a giant bailout or something like that. And maybe they'll succeed, but maybe not. I mean, think about how close the call was, even for TARP in Congress. I mean, there were 2 votes, or maybe 3. I think for sure there were 2 votes, but the first vote failed. And it took a lot of arm twisting to get those votes changed on the second time around. And now imagine trying to do that out in 50 states, in 50 state capitals, where you need to get 26 states on board. It's not logistically easy, particularly if you got a time clock 60 days going for it. So it's going to change the mentality. It's going to force government to have other ways of dealing with problems like that. And here's one obvious example. You want an obvious example?
Yeah, please.
Look west of the Mississippi. There is vast tracts of federally held lands. I mean, some places like Arizona, Alaska, 50+% of their lands are under federal control.
Correct.
It isn't difficult to see a very easy path to raise revenue quickly that doesn't involve more borrowing, that involves creating a situation where you have more private sector wealth creation. It involves selling a small proportion of the federal lands out west of the Mississippi. I mean, you sold 10% of those off, and I'm not talking about national parks or anything else, but if you put 10% of those western lands on sale, you'd take care of it. You'd raise your bailout money, but the net would be that you would free up resources for the private sector. We would overcome. So but I bring this back to my point, is if you get rid of the limitless credit card, the incentive to make the right judgment calls on policy, even by the bad people, even for the wrong reasons, grows dramatically. And again, because of the destructive power of government spending, all we need is to win on the margins, and then the compounding takes over. So all I'm saying to you is, look, we don't have to win 90% of the time. We don't have to win 70% of the time. We just got to win 51% of the time regularly. Okay. If we win 51% of the time regularly, we win.
Well, although we may see a reduction in government expenditures, for example, on financing college educations and stuff, and items such as that, isn't the growth in Social Security, in which the government has never put any money aside, all the trillions of dollars that's owed in Social Security, the unfunded debt, is all IOU. So when the Social Security Administration says, "Oh no, we're flush, we're good till 2036 or whatever the case may be," all they have is a bunch of IOUs from a company, from a guy who's bankrupt, and then you have all of the other social programs which continue to grow. Doesn't the growth on one end overtake the savings, the reduction on the other end, and you wind up with a wash and maybe even lose some ground?
I don't think so. I mean, that's too complicated for me to project out. I mean, again, if we do nothing, if we allow this current system to ride, the path is clear.
Oh, no, I agree, yeah.
Right. So the question is, knowing that's coming, I mean, do we have time or do we don't have time? You got to make a judgment. Do we have time to turn the system? if you don't think we have time, then you're wasting your time in the microphone. You might as well build yourself a bunker and get your weapons. Although they just arrested a bunch of guys for that out in South Carolina or something the other day. But the bottom line is your very presence at the microphone implies that you think we have time. If you think we have time, then what's the best way to do it? You create a binding structure, as binding as you can among the political class to get the job done. You have a payload to get the job done that is not, purist Murray Rothbard type stuff. It's flexible, but it creates really good incentive structures so that the right decisions are made most of the time. That is something that you can look to. Will it play out perfectly? Will the incentives be strong enough? I mean, are people able to overcome even strong incentives to do the right thing? Sure. I mean, stupid people can prevail. Bad people can prevail. All we can do is do our best. And but the good news is, if you look at places like Sweden or New Zealand that used to be hardcore, far more hardcore socialists than they are now. They crashed their systems in the 70s and 80s. When they crashed their systems, they learned. And in New Zealand's case, they turned over about 30% of the economy to the private sector. And that was done by socialists. In Sweden, they even though they're still terrible from a libertarian perspective in a lot of regards, they liberalized their economy in tremendous ways. One of the things we see right now with Uber and Lyft and Airbnb and all of the variants of that and all throughout the sector is that one of the ways that our private sector is responding to more government regulation is that they're taking previously unused resources and freeing them up for use in ways that aren't yet regulated. So don't ever underestimate the power of people to learn, even the wrong people, to sustain their own lives and to keep economic growth happening.
Well, you've encouraged me. You've convinced me. I will try to take your words with me and carry them around so I'm not so depressed all the time. Now, what kind of progress are you making, and when do you anticipate that you'll have this accomplished?
Well, we've got to get it done by April 12, 2021. That's the self-repeal date. Our targets right now are December 31st, 2018, getting it done by then. So we've got a 2.5-year timeline, a little less than 2.5 years. Now, why is that plausible? We picked up 4 states with very minimal amount of money spent. We spent altogether maybe $500,000 in 4 states. Now, sounds like a lot of money, but the typical lobbying costs of anything is much greater than that. And this is not lobbying. This is purely educational work. So we didn't have any full-time lobbyists. We weren't on the ground. And we also spread the word in D.C. and 15 other states. And so our goal is to get 10 states in by the end of next year. From 10 states, we want to double and double. So basically, the goal is to have 10 states in by the end of next year, get 20 states in by the end of the next year, get the balance of the 18 states we need by the end of the next year. And so we'll have the 8 states at the end of the next year. And then we'll be on our path. The key thing to understand here is that if you look around history, there are many compacts, many agreements among the states that have 38 or more states that were formed in the past. In fact, 7 were formed in the past. One of those was done in under 2 years. A couple of those were done under 5 years. There's 23 uniform laws that have been replicated in more than 38 states. Some of those have been done in under 5 years. I think there's 3 that have been done in under 5 years. So because of modern technology especially, if you've got a good policy product, and we've done polling now in 5 states and nationally, we've got a policy product that commands supermajority support. If you look at history, if you look at our polling data, there's no reason why this thing with adequate funding can't get to the next level. And so for us, we keep telling folks, it's really a question of funding. If we had the funding to have boots on the ground, to have our C4, for example, hire genuine lobbying teams, we would have, this session, we probably would have had 10 states. So the question is, will people put their money where their mouth is? Are they going to support our efforts, or are they not? Because I'm convinced that for less than the cost of a ballot measure in California, we could amend the Constitution and save the nation. And that's something that you would think would make sense when we're spending so much money on these folks running for president that wouldn't seem like the best investment.
Right. Now, which 3 states seem to be ripe to go or ready to go and sign on?
Well, right now, North Carolina, Michigan, and Ohio are moving forward.
Michigan.
North Carolina, that's right. Michigan is waiting to get on the Senate floor.
Wow.
North Carolina's got one more committee before the House floor. Ohio just got introduced before they went on summer break, so that won't get moving till October. But Michigan and North Carolina are moving very fast. We need as much help as we can get, as much education as we can get out on the ground in Michigan and in North Carolina. So I would encourage folks to go to www.compactforamerica.org, pull down some educational materials. We have all kinds of things, policy reports, white papers, talking points, you name it. Pull that down, start writing letters to the editor, start talking about the compact for a balanced budget, start talking about getting a federal balanced budget amendment by agreement of the states. Learn how this all works and become an advocate in your local community. Bring us into Skype conversations like this. Don't just, it can't just be on these highly rated, super professional, awesome shows like yours. We got to be on, the local channel. We've got to be on the community channel. We've got to have ordinary people engaging with us. And we've got a deep bench of experts, all of whom will have some time, at least one of them will be available all the time to conduct these kinds of efforts. And then and the great thing about our bench is we've got about 10, 12 experts and advisors that are spread around the country and are within one or two states of any place. And so if the funding exists for a travel expense, then they can visit, they can do a speech. People like Ilya Shapiro of the Cato Institute, people like Dean Clancy, formerly of FreedomWorks, people like Kevin Gutzman, Dr. Kevin Gutzman, who's done best-selling books on history and law and constitutional work with Tom Woods. These guys are all on our team, and they're willing to travel, and they have traveled in many cases voluntarily without asking for a dime, just their travel expense. So this is something where if you want to get engaged, we have the resources, we've got the expertise, we've got the product. It's up to you.
So people can make a donation by going to compactforamerica.org. Am I correct?
They can. That's
okay,
correct.
Very
There's
good. All right.
a donation button there.
All right. And Ilya Shapiro is a regular on our program. We've had him on at least twice. I know of, right, Preston? Yeah. Yeah. He's been he's been a terrific guest. Well, which state's going to give you the most trouble?
Well, on our website we have we euphemistically call them challenge states.
All right, challenge states. Thanks.
But what's interesting is the Supreme Court now is getting so lawless in its decision making that even now some of the challenge states are becoming open, because we learned this last session the word legislature means ballot measure. That's what they said in the elections clause of the Constitution, where it referenced the legislature doing redistricting. Well, then they said it was okay for Arizona to have that done by a ballot measure created entity. Now, the flip side of that is that Article 5 talks about legislatures doing, the amendment process. And so now apparently we can do Article 5 amendments and organizing conventions with a ballot measure if the Supreme Court's consistent. Now, they probably won't be consistent, but still, if they're going to give us a tool, we're going to use it. And if we have the freedom to use a ballot measure, states like Oregon and Washington become possible, whereas they were really off the charts before. But if you really want the list of tough states, it would be still Washington, Oregon, California, Vermont, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Those are tough states. But
the original 13 colonies.
Yeah, and a few other coastal states. But, just
how dare they?
But things could change though, because New York is getting so corrupt, and so their economy is getting hurt so badly from all this mismanagement over the years. Even California, even though I suppose they just paid off their deficit, that's what they've been rallying around. California people are leaving in droves.
Right.
Even people on the center left generally don't want to crash the system.
Right.
They don't generally want to make their lives of their kids worse. If we can just make the case to them in non-threatening terms, to say to them, look, whether you're on the left or the right, if you want government that doesn't waste money, you've got to limit their credit card. Even if you want the programs I regard as stupid, you don't want them stupidly run by any standard.
Right.
You can't have them not run stupidly if the people in charge think they can borrow whatever it takes to paper over whatever stupid thing they did, right? So if you can make that pitch, if you can make the pitch that efficiency, even in what we would regard as bad programs, that efficiency in bad programs requires a sense of priorities, and a sense of priorities requires not having a limitless credit card, then you can maybe pull them in. I mean, there's a reason why 44 states have constitutional debt limits and balanced budget amendments, and even in deep blue states, they haven't repealed them, even though they play with them, even though they don't exactly follow them perfectly, but they do not repeal them. There's a reason, because they've learned, at least at the state level, that
What happened?
We're getting some Skype issues.
resource limitations. We need that to be shared elsewhere.
Okay, we just had a little skip on Skype, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you still there? Nick, are you still there? Can you hear me? Hold on, Nick, don't go away. I think we just had a Skype issue. Oh, boy, you look funny now.
I'm here.
You're there. You look like the creature from the Black Lagoon right now, the way Skype is.
It's just the internet connection.
Okay, there's something, we have a Skype issue. Anyway, you mentioned credit cards. Would you call my wife and explain this principle to her? Only kidding. Only kidding,
Hey,
by the way. And I hope my wife is not listening, or I'm in deep trouble. I'm only kidding. All right, Nick, I want to thank you so much for being on our program. Where our time is about up. You've been an absolutely informative, inspirational, and just a knowledgeable guest. And we do hope that you accept our invitation to return at a later date. Oh, geez, he's gone
It'd be my
again.
pleasure and honor. It's great to talk with you.
Yeah. I want to give you the last 30 seconds, if anything that you'd like to add to this conversation or close it out.
We need your help.
Okay.
We need your help. Get to compactforamerica.org, compactforamerica.org.
Okay, and
Is it working?
semi-working. We've heard that, and I'll get on that today. Okay, I promise. You'll get my check in the mail. Thank you so much, Nick. Appreciate you being here. Okay, folks, that's the end of our program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, folks, as my wife would say, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.